I digress by telling you that things were not going well back home, and Jim made it a point, not only that first year, but every year until his parents died, some 10 or 12, maybe 15 years later, he sent half his paycheck home. His brother Paul went back to help care for them, and that was their agreement, that Jim would send the money and Paul would be there to look after the older folks. Jim's father had been a veteran of the Civil War, and then he had also, in his younger days, I think he was an adventurer. He made the trip to California for the gold rush. He guided prospectors on their way out. He and his friend Kit Carson had both grown up in Missouri, and when the time came that gold was discovered, they set forth together. And when Red Christian decided to return to Missouri, he went down the coast of Mexico by ship. 51 of them made that trip instead of trying to come back. Perhaps the mountains and the Indians were something they dreaded. I don't know why. But they went back to the Isthmus of Panama and were given water and told, do not drink any of the water. It will be certain death. And they went through the bogs for 20 miles. There was no canal, of course. 2 of their companions died, and there was nothing to do but leave them, because the situation was such that they didn't dare spend an extra hour trying to get them out and bury them. They went on their way. They got across the isthmus, but they did take malaria, something that he fought the rest of his life. They got across the isthmus, took a boat to Cuba, another boat into New Orleans. We have his a little tabulation of the money he spent in New Orleans. It was very interesting. Got a ship up the Mississippi to their old home in Missouri. He was truly an adventurer for his time, and then was not home very long before he went into the services of the Confederate Army. And the people in Missouri, as you know, had a very hard time because they were border states. Some were sympathizers of the Northern Army, some were sympathizers of the Southern. And Rit's mother had raised her family, and Rit stayed on to help her until he went to the service. And then he'd come home whenever he could. In those days, apparently, if you got anywhere near your home, you were free to go and visit and then go back. And he did this. He was wounded. So it was necessary for Jim to help these people at home. His mother taught. But remember, there were still 8 more children at home. And I'm sure with his family coming on and a place to improve on, that it wasn't always easy for Jim Christian to send that money home. Nor for Georgia. They built a little home of 2 rooms, but down a well on this place 3 miles back from Pallier Canyon, and moved here in the fall of 1902. Inez, their 3rd child, was born in December of that year. Things seemed to be going so well, and then in the early spring their house burned to the ground. It was all they could do to save the 3 babies and get out a little bit of their, a few things of their furnishings. And kindly neighbors took them in and rebuilt the house in a month. They lived with the Baker family, and they lived with the White family, and loved those people as long as they lived because of what they did for them. As time went on, Jim added, and Georgia added more land, and the place increased by several sections, some to the east, some to the west, some to the south. His brother, Ben, had settled on the section to the southeast, his brother Ernest the section to the south. It's interesting to note, when they got ready to leave Armstrong County, those 2 boys, they came to Jim and gave him the first opportunity to buy their land, which he did. He bought the Ben section. Then his two sons later would buy the Ernest section because he would be gone and it would be sold. But his sister came out and filed on land, and one sister came out and taught. All five of his brothers came and worked on the J.A. Everybody except Tom, who had been born in Texas. He went to North Texas, made a veterinarian, and settled in Waco, and never had any association with the J.A. Ranch. But the six other boys did have. Jim Christian was a man who had a real goal in life, and it centered around his home, family, first of all, and the environment that they would grow up in. And then his love for his cattle, he never overcame that. He always said he understood a cow brute, as he called it, much better than he did an individual, a person. And he loved to spend time with them, and he knew them, each one separately, and their personalities like he knew those of his children. He gave land for a schoolhouse on his home section. It was northwest of this house. He served on the school board for a long time, 10 or 12 years, I think. A young woman came into the community who would teach music, so they gave music to all the children. And incidentally, in 1907, William Terrell Christian was born, my husband. And he never got over the fact that he had to take piano lessons because the music teacher was staying in the home. And he really didn't enjoy piano music the rest of his life. He liked anything better than piano music, and I was sorry about that. But Jim Christian was a builder. He was always, he was serious. He read good things always. He read about the outside world and planned to see as much of it as he could. Georgia was a very great helpmeet for him. She was a person who sought education, and both of them educated themselves beyond the degree that you'd ever expect could be possible. As the family grew, and you realize there were no TVs, no radios, no connection with the outside world, they took the best magazines they could take, and after the chores were done and the supper was over at night, the family gathered, and Georgia read aloud to them. And they were familiar with the classics, and they were familiar with the better things, as well as the Bible she read to them. Their church was highly important to them. They belonged to the Disciples of Christ. Went to the Llano School for church on Sunday afternoon, but went on Sunday morning into Claude to help the struggling little Christian church get going, and worked in it steadily as long as they lived. They went to Amarillo to do their shopping, and there were no specific roads, as I have heard Georgia say. They would go up one day and spend the night and then shop all the next day. And she had a real distaste for Labor Day because one of their annual trips was made on Sunday before Labor Day, and they got there and all the stores were closed for a whole day. They knew the merchants, they knew where they wanted to shop, and about twice a week she went into Claude for mail. And mail was so important to those people. She had family at home that she heard from. She wrote to all of Jim's family, and her letters were something good to receive.